Okay, my nerve pulse and pulse analogy will be on boiling salt water for some spaghetti noodles. Oops. Alright, resting potential. Inside the neuron at rest, the neuron, they're still working. They're not just chilling and just like, hey, going to sleep. They're still working. Potassium is more concentrated inside, resulting in a negative inside charge, while sodium is more concentrated outside, resulting in a positive charge outside. In this picture, we see potassium, we see A, which is the anions, and there's more anions inside, which makes the whole thing negative inside. And if you look outside, you see sodium and chloride. You see potassium in there, but it's more positive because we have more sodium than we have chloride to make it negative. And the difference between the inside and the outside results in a charge of negative 70. So sodium, like I said, sodium is more concentrated, and these ions can't travel freely across the membrane as they please, but they travel through a channel. And as you can see, channel right here, allowing potassium to exit and sodium to enter. And it is the sodium-potassium pump which permits the stability and returns the ions back to where they're more concentrated. And for every 3 potassium ions that are out, for every 3 sodium ions that are out, 2 potassium ions are back in the neuron. And the difference between the charges is known as polarity, and like I said, it's negative 70 millivolts. And on the stove, we have our room temperature water placed on a hot stove, ready to come to a boil for our spaghetti noodles. The water molecules are vibrating as they normally would in the pot, but they're not enough, or the water is not hot enough for them to evaporate and turn into gas molecules, nor hot enough for the water to boil because the water hasn't been on the stove for that long. At the threshold of excitation. So as in the picture, we can see that the difference has decreased to negative 55 instead of negative 70. This is the typical threshold level. And the polarization is bringing the neuron closer to firing. We have sodium, which is entering the cell. And if we don't have enough sodium entering the cell, this is because the stimulus wasn't strong enough. And it wasn't strong enough to trigger an action, which is like a false alarm, and it's known as a graded potential. So let's say, going back to the pot analogy, your water is, you see that, it's been on there long enough, and the bubbles are starting to form, as you can see in the picture, but you have to let your dog out, so you turn off the stove. So the water couldn't reach into 100 degrees Celsius to be considered to be boiling for you to put the spaghetti noodles in. So it's kind of like a false alarm, like, when we're getting there, and it's like, so instead of reaching all the way up to positive 30, been just like a little hump because it didn't get enough energy to stimulate an action. So now we dive into our action potential, and this triggers the voltage gated ions. We have so much sodium diffusing in the neuron that the membrane polarity reverses to a positive inside. And if in this picture, just for a second, so much sodium is in, it becomes positive, and the outside becomes negative. And it does this all along the axon. So for a split second, more positive, and it's gonna jump to a section, and keep switching it for a split second because so much sodium is being diffused inside. So we're not at negative 70, we're not at negative 55, we are reaching to the top to fire. We have fired. And going back to the pot, our water is boiling, bubbling, gas molecules are rising up, and we are ready to put salt so that it may dissolve And we could put our spaghetti in. And going back to the chart right here is an absolute refractory period. We are going to fire, and there's no way in doubt that we will not fire. And the all or none law. Once the threshold is hit, the action potential will happen. The amplitude and velocity of an action potential remains constant. Action potentials are the same no matter what. And the water is going to boil at 100 degrees no matter what. And if the stimulus is at negative 56, so let's say, going back to the picture, the chart should say, if it was just below, it would not have triggered an action potential. But if it was higher, negative 54, then it would have triggered. So negative 55 or higher is going to trigger an action no matter what. But anything lower will not. So if we go like 100 degrees, water will boil. 99, no, it will not. Going back to the chart, we're gonna go back down away from firing, just on the repolarization, and sometimes we even go below our resting potential point, which is at negative 72. Anywhere it's negative, let's say for example negative 75, and this is known as hyperpolarization. And we're less likely to stimulate another action because it is so low and away from firing is going to take a while. And this is known as the refractory period right here. The axons can't respond to another stimulus no matter how strong. And this is to prevent signals from traveling in opposite directions at the same time or simultaneously. And that is it. Oh, I did. It's all or none law. Oh, release of neurotransmitters. Oh my goodness. Almost forgot. So in the neuron, this occurs after the neuron has fired due to depolarization. Certain receptors bind to the terminal period, which is known as exocytosis. So if we look at this picture, this is the presynaptic and this is the postsynaptic. And we see our vesicles, we see our voltage gated calcium channels. And the vesicles are being released and accepted by our receptors. And for the pop, the water has reached its boiling point, and like I said, it's ready for the salt molecules, for the salt to be added. So at first you have our beautiful crystal salt, and then it is diffused into our water. It's accepted into the family, the water, and it divides perfectly. The sodium is here, chloride is here, and with the water molecules. If the water wasn't as hot, the salt would diffuse, but it would take a little while because the water has not reached that temperature, and the water would have a cloudy color to it. But since the water is nice and warm, we pour the salt in, and it dissolves beautifully, giving it back that transparent look. And all the images were found from big images, and this information was received from the textbook and the lectures in class.